Welcome back, everyone. Second session of day 2, and this is with Wendy May. So she's going to be talking about regenerative purpose. So Wendy's a purpose coach, a conscious leadership consultant, an author, and speaker. So after leaving behind a successful corporate career, she embarked on a heart-led journey of service work in 2015. As a change maker, she supports the process of soul purpose alignment so we can create a world of purpose, a world of work that works for everyone, which I'm sure includes purpose. In this session, she's going to be talking about an approach where purpose arises from a dynamic space of we instead of a defined space of me, 4 core qualities that allow purpose to flow freely, and how to practice purpose instead of trying to pursue it. So welcome, Wendy, and take us away.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. And wow, always sound much more impressive on paper than I feel in myself sometimes. Yeah, thank you to you, Steve, and to Mark, and to the whole team for putting together this event. I know that it's a lot of work. Yeah, it's funny. I participated in my first Global Purpose Summit in 2018. This was back in San Francisco, back in the day when we still had in-person meetings. And at that time, it was sort of a strange thing to do, to have a 2-day conference just about purpose. And now suddenly, this is like, I think this is the 3rd online purpose summit that I've been part of in this past year. And I think lately I've been seeing a lot of people writing about purpose, and it's, I think, safe to say that purpose is trending, which is a big part of why I'm here, because I think that when something that used to be kind of a fringe thing becomes commonplace in our collective consciousness, there is a huge opportunity for expansion for humanity, to evolve in this moment and really look at why we're here and what we're doing here in this life. Actually, I want to start with a question. And if we were in a physical room together, I would ask for a show of hands. It's not really practical in a Zoom room. So maybe I'll ask for a show of hearts, and you can just type a little emoji in the chat if this resonates with you. So my question is, how many of you have ever felt tension or anxiety or some sense of being lost, not knowing what your purpose is? Yeah. So this is the interesting conundrum, because as purpose is expanding in the collective consciousness, there is both an opportunity and a challenge. So I think that we kind of have this idea that purpose is desirable, right? We generally think purpose is a good thing to have. And we want to have a purpose, or we want to be able to live our lives on purpose. Now, the tricky thing about that is that whenever we have something that we hold up as desirable, there is the potential for there to be a lack narrative around that. So this idea of, I don't know what my purpose is, or I don't have it figured out yet, creates stress, which is actually counter to purpose. So this is where my interest comes in. So I'm interested not so much in the question of what our purpose is, but how we're doing purpose. Because the thing is, we can have all sorts of beautiful, noble purposes that we are working on, whether it's, we're starting a clean energy company, or running a meditation center, educating people about ocean plastic pollution, right? All sorts of beautiful causes that we can get behind. But the thing is, if we're still doing it in the old way, in an old paradigm way of personal empire building and striving and sort of this egocentric perspective, we're really kind of missing the point. So my inquiry with regenerative purpose is more not about the what of purpose, but about the how. Because otherwise we risk kind of creating the same structures, but with different names and different labels. So, it's not fashionable anymore to pursue money or power or status as a goal, but it's pretty fashionable now to pursue purpose. But if we do that in the same way that we were pursuing money and power and status, then we haven't really changed. We've just kind of remixed the same salad and put some new age dressing on it. So this is where regenerative purpose comes in. And there's many names for what I'm going to talk about. I call it regenerative purpose, but we could just as easily call it interdependent purpose or dynamic purpose. Feminine purpose is another way of talking about it. So yeah, that's what I want to introduce today. And I'm going to share a couple of slides. Let me just get that up. You can see my screen? Yeah, okay. So, So there's a number of ways how what I'm talking about as regenerative purpose is different than conventional purpose. One is that we kind of drop this goal orientation around purpose. That purpose is something that we get to, that we reach or achieve, and we get there in a straight line. From my perspective, purpose is more of a practice. So it's something that we never get to, but we can approach it, we can approximate it. I always think about this idea of a sine wave, I think, where you kind of have like a midpoint, and then you have this line that's going up and down, right? And half of the time you're above the line, and half of the time you're below the line. But as you keep adjusting and adapting and course correcting along the way, there are moments when you touch the line, and there are these moments of grace and alignment that we feel. But effectively, we're always kind of rebalancing ourselves to get back in the right direction. So that's one important distinction, I think, between this conventional purpose and regenerative purpose. And you could see this as a continuum also from more of a three-dimensional understanding of purpose to more of a four-dimensional or even five-dimensional understanding of purpose and how it works. Some of the other things that distinguish this new paradigm purpose from old paradigm purpose is that we don't just have one purpose. Our lives are multi-purpose. And also, purpose is not something that we define or diagnose about ourselves. It's not something that's encoded in our DNA, but it's dynamic. It's always changing, evolving, transforming, just as we are, as part of life. And purpose isn't personal, right? So this is what Steve was mentioning in the introduction about not being a question about me, but being a creation in the space of we, that there is a relational aspect of purpose. So purpose doesn't exist in a vacuum. I can't go and sit in a room by myself and figure out what my purpose is because it wouldn't be relevant. I can only know and understand and embody my purpose in the context of being in a conversation with the rest of life, with the rest of humanity, with my community. And it's a conversation. This last one is really important. The idea that purpose is formed versus purpose is experienced. And we tend to get a little twisted about this in a lot of different ways, that I think it's human nature for us to focus on the form or the thing that we can see and touch, the tangible object. And yet a lot of times when we say we're looking for purpose, what we're really looking for is an experience. So we can kind of question ourselves, right, around the form versus the experience, right? So do you really want to marry a PhD in astrophysics who speaks 7 languages and makes a mean lasagna? Or is it that you want to feel loved and seen and supported? Do you want to live in a 200-year-old brownstone mansion overlooking Central Park in New York City? Or is it that you want to have a home of your own that feels comfortable and spacious and allows you to feel connected to the ancestors of the land where you live? Same thing goes for purpose, right? Do you want to be the founder of a nonprofit who is bringing clean water to all of sub-Saharan Africa? Or is it that you want to feel alive and aligned with life and feel your place, feel a sense of belonging in this human matrix that we're all part of? To feel yourself as a node in this kind of worldwide web of humanity, and be at the intersection of the vertical and the horizontal. And basically, in this intersection between the vertical and the horizontal, the experience that we're looking for as human beings, I believe, is being able to direct traffic. And by traffic, I mean directing the flow of energy using our heart as a guide. So it is that experience, I think, that we're craving and really thirsty for when we say that we're looking for purpose. Yeah, so I think before I go on to talk more about regenerative purpose, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about where we've been. This is a Venn diagram. The conventional purpose model, which this is a Venn diagram model of purpose that has been circulating for, I don't know, probably the last 8 or 9 years on the internet. So if you've been investigating this topic of purpose for a while, you've probably seen some version of this. A lot of times it's labeled as ikigai, which is the Japanese word for reason for being, although that's also a little bit mislabeled. I'm not going to get into that here, but I have an essay around the cultural appropriation of ikigai, which you can Google if you're interested in that part. So this Venn diagram model of purpose is presenting a diagnostic approach, right? It's looking at these 4 categories of things: what you love to do, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you get paid for, and treating it as a problem set. So looking at purpose being the solution to whatever the overlap of these 4 categories is. So I interviewed the woman who created this model when I was writing my book, and she's a lovely human being, and I think that this is a really important step in our understanding of purpose, that in some way, these 4 dimensions are really an integral part of purpose and manifesting our purpose. So I don't want to throw this out. It's still very much a useful model, and I would say even foundational model for where we're going next. And I also think that there's room for us to expand and to upgrade this model as we're becoming more evolved and more sophisticated in our understanding of purpose. So, I want to go through each of the elements from the old model of purpose and talk about expanded definitions of what those might look like in a new paradigm and how we can kind of broaden our understanding of these different dimensions. So the first one here is around what you love to do. I always like to say that purpose is not what you love to do, but purpose is what you do from love. So there is this idea, which I think was maybe started by Joseph Campbell, around follow your bliss, follow your passion, follow your pleasure, and that will lead you to purpose. I think that's true. And I think there's also a little bit more to it than that. Because what I think purpose does, or rather what pleasure does, is it gets us out of this patriarchal, capitalist kind of mindset, kind of the Protestant ethic of work is suffering. And the more you sacrifice and the more you struggle, the better person you are, right? So we want to break out of that mold of feeling like work needs to be suffering or it needs to be hard in order for us to earn merits. So pleasure helps us get out of that box. But that's not the end game, in my opinion. I think that pleasure helps us, but it's just a layover on the way to purpose, because in my own experience of purpose, I would say that purpose isn't always pleasurable. It's not even always pleasant. But sometimes we do things that are uncomfortable or unpleasant because we have devotion to something that is beyond us, that actually allows us to choose, not because we're in a habit of suffering, but consciously choosing a path and putting our energy into something because we believe in it, because we have devotion to it. So that brings us to this element of what you love to do becoming actually a movement of energy, which is creative flow. And this movement of creative energy is really around, it's our natural response to life when we're being spontaneous in our actions, when we're moving from love and not from conditioning or roles or obligations or expectations. The second one, what you're good at. So what you're good at is generally regarded as our skills and talents, right? Things that we have developed or that we were gifted with when we were born. And this, in the new paradigm purpose model, is transformed to GIFT, which is an acronym that stands for our genius in fluid truth. And this is beyond just skills and talents, because it encompasses everything that makes us uniquely ourselves. It's not just our skills and talents, but our station in life, our privileges, our circumstances, our networks. It includes all of the unearned gifts, all of the raw materials that we have to work with. And we often disown some of those, right, because they haven't been earned. Somehow they were just given to us by accident of birth, by genetic lottery. So genius in fluid truth really expands the concept to become more than just what we're good at, but everything that we are, everything that makes up us as a unique individual. And the fluid truth part is really important because it's not a fixed idea of who we are. It's understanding that who we are is also changing as we're in relationship with our environment. And this is something that changes. It's a fluid truth. The next one around what the world needs. So I call this one pain, or personally activating information. Now, what the world needs is, it's really tricky, right? Because ultimately what the world needs is a projection, because how can we possibly know what the world needs? And I mean, if you watch the news at all these days, you can see that the world needs a lot of things. And the trouble with that is that there's no selection, there's no filter. So our awareness becomes overwhelmed by looking at this projection of all the things that are needed in the world, but not having any filter as to what's actually relevant for me. So we get really overwhelmed and we get paralyzed and we don't know what to do, right? So we typically think about pain as something negative or not wanted. And with pain becoming personally activating information, it's basically just a highlighter. It is something that tells us to pay attention here. It's something that we can use to selectively focus our attention in a specific area and to direct our energy there. Just like the body tells us to direct energy to a specific place when we feel pain. So, yeah, that's personally activating information. This last one around what you get paid for. So, what you get paid for, it's great. We definitely, in our three-dimensional reality, need to get paid and pay the bills and support ourselves on a material financial plane. But the expanded notion of this is abundance flow. And abundance flow includes money, but it is not only money. It includes connections, insights, support, guidance, love, recognition, community. It's pretty much everything that supports and nourishes and guides us. So, yeah, here we have an expanded notion with abundance flow. And there's a lot of innovation happening in this area, which is pretty exciting to see with pay what you can models and an understanding of the attention economy, right? So people being more conscious about their use of social media or apps and things like that. We're starting to understand that the resources that we have available to us is not just limited to money and things. And what I would love to see is this future economic ecosystem where we're creating these double positive exchanges, where it's not just one person gives and the other person receives, and there's a finite amount of resource, but that actually in the process of designing these exchanges, we're able to do so in such an elegant way that we actually create more value than there was before. So that's a little bit about how these different elements or dimensions of purpose from the old model can be expanded and understood in a slightly different way. Now, with this next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how this all fits together. The regenerative purpose model is a flow cycle instead of a Venn diagram. And these elements are basically, so with gift and pain, these are basically radio towers. They are signal emitters and receivers, you could say. And I think of gift on the left side as being the individual element, and the pain on the right side is the collective element. I know this is a bit confusing because it's still personal, because it's personally activating information, but it's the collective element in the sense that it's information that arises from our interaction with the world around us. So it's the collective element. If you look at this from a polarity perspective, gift would be the positive pole, right? What we are, what we're made up of, all of the things that make us who we are is a positive pole. And what is happening in existence in our environment, in the ecosystem around us, that is a negative pole. And there's a natural attraction between these two things, right? Like magnets, that they attract each other and they want to come together. And what that creates is a flow of energy. So you have this creative flow, this arrow on the top going from left to right, which is energy in the direction of giving. It's energy going out from the individual to the world. And it's really the art of responding. And to complete the circuit, you have this energy flow coming back from the collective to the individual, which is abundance flow. And that's what makes it sustainable, right? If you are missing any of these pieces, purpose work becomes depleting or distorted in some way. So instead of trying to figure out what our purpose is and pursue it, it becomes a dance. It's an interdependent dance between us and the rest of the universe. And it's effectively about balancing, right? So we're balancing our ability to tune in to ourselves, our ability to tune out to what's going on in the world. We're also balancing these movements of energy, of giving and receiving. And there's a balance also of being and doing. So this is what creates the dynamic, interdependent, co-creative cycle of regenerative purpose. So then the question becomes, okay, that sounds great. How do I do this? How do I actually become more purposeful or live in alignment with purpose? So I want to talk about the 4 core purpose qualities. So for each one of these elements in the flow cycle, there are things that can block it, and there are things that can facilitate it or free it. So with our genius and fluid truth, this idea that we have a fixed identity, ironically, can hold us back from participating in the flow of purpose. So this idea of, I think I know who I am, I know what kind of person I am, I know what I'm good at. This feeling of I know can actually be a block, because if there's something that we know that we are, then there's also something that we're disowning on the other side of it. So there's potential and possibility that's left out of the picture there. And where genius in fluid truth gets unleashed is when we cultivate the quality of authenticity. And this is kind of obvious, right? I think a lot of people talk about authenticity and how important it is. And authenticity really is, I mean, some people would say it's the difference between fake and real, but I think of it more as the difference between partial and whole. Because oftentimes, back to this whole identity, we have things that we identify with, that we think of as ourselves, and we have things that we think are not part of ourselves. And so cultivating authenticity, it's not so much about, revealing the real self and discarding the fake self. It's about moving from partial to whole. Because what does it mean when we're partial? When we're partial, it means we have a preference for certain aspects of ourselves over others. And authenticity is the practice of embodying and integrating and accepting and owning and expressing all of us, not just the parts that we prefer, not just the parts that we're partial to. The second one, with personally activating information, what blocks it is the signal overwhelm. And what we want to do here is cultivate the quality of attunement. So in the world today, we're getting bombarded with messages all the time, right? We're just absolutely flooded with so much data and information all of the time that it just completely, it's like mind freeze. So it's really a task. It takes a lot of effort to sift through all of that noise and know what of the information that's coming to us is actually important for us to receive. What does our radio antenna, what does our receiver actually need in order to fulfill its purpose? And then being able to filter out everything else and kind of just let that drift by us without causing too much distraction or stress or anxiety. And attunement is what allows us to listen to those signals that are meant for us and kind of block out the noise, which can confuse us or paralyze us. Now, with creative flow, the conditioning that is here with creative flow is this goal orientation, right? So we're trained from a really young age, from school and all of our training through adulthood, work situations, to be focused on the outcome, to be focused on the goal. And what we want to cultivate instead is the ability to respond, responsiveness. We want to be able to engage in life, not from conditioning and expectations, but whatever the spontaneous action is that's arising from presence and arising from love. With abundance flow, the thing that blocks it or contracts it is the myth of independence, right? So we have been completely brainwashed with this about needing to be independent, self-sufficient, having our own everything, instead of being in this more sharing and exchanging and having access to resources instead of having to own resources. So this is also something that we see shifting in our current paradigm, which is we're realizing that we actually don't need to own and control and manage so much stuff when we relax and we trust in the universe that everything is provided for. And cultivating the quality of receptivity is what allows us to be open to that. And again, receptivity to not just resources and money, but also guidance and support. Sometimes it's redirection or rejection, which is something that we're receiving also, which is part of being in abundance flow. So this brings me to how do we actually manifest this, right? So if we go back to these qualities, this is a long-term game, right? We can cultivate authenticity, attunement, responsiveness, receptivity, and this creates a fertile ground for purpose to grow, right? We're actually creating this friendly environment for purpose to enter when we cultivate these qualities in ourselves. And this is something that we can develop over time. We can become more authentic, more attuned, more responsive, more receptive. But this is a long game, right? So oftentimes people will ask me, okay, that's nice, but how do I get my purpose now, right? How do I kind of form or manifest my purpose in the now? So that brings me to this next page, where effectively what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, if we embrace this notion of purpose, is we are learning to manage our own domain, right? So as the sovereign ruler of our own kingdom or queendom, we call the shots in our space. And regenerative purpose basically asks us to mind our own business with an ecosystem awareness. So minding our own business means taking care and being conscious with how we're using our body, our energy, our time, our money, our attention, our relationships, all of the things that are ours to decide, to choose about, we bring intention and we bring awareness to that. And it comes down to basically two kinds of commitments, right? So rather than having a purpose statement, which is sort of a boilerplate kind of, this is my purpose, we make commitments to ourselves and to others with this frame of managing our own business. And there's a feminine aspect to that and a masculine aspect to that. So the feminine is really around selection. It's around space and what we allow into our space with intelligence, right? So you see this image of the sperm and the egg. This is really about being receptive, but not passive, because there is a choosing process, what goes in and what stays out. We have boundaries that we decide upon what is allowed in our domain as the sovereign ruler of our kingdom or queendom. And this also becomes ritualized, right? We practice it by clearing our space on a regular basis and making sure that that space is clean and open. On the other hand, we also make direction-based commitments. So this is a practice that I call devotional decision-making. And devotional decision-making, you could say, is the masculine aspect of this. It's around choosing which way to go. So again, there's intention, there's awareness, there's choice-making happening. And we're deciding to turn left or to turn right or to go straight or to stop. This is about choices, about making choices about what direction to go. So when we're doing these things, purpose manifests on a day-to-day basis, right? It doesn't have to be something huge and grand and it can be something very small. It can be something that has a very fleeting form or even no form at all. That just is an experience or an interaction that comes and goes. But if we're being aware about how we make these decisions on a day-to-day basis, we will be aligned with our purpose. This is the last page that I'm going to share on this. And this is around just drilling one step deeper with the devotional decision making, right? Because we're talking about what is our business to manage? What do we actually have, sovereign rulership over? And this is a simplification, but it's basically two different kinds of currency. We have our energetic currency and our material currency. And we're asking two questions about these different types of currency all the time. Is this energy, or is this material, being moved in alignment with my core values? And this is how we go into alignment with resource flow or abundance flow. And the other question is my energy and my materials, are they being used to create what is most valuable for me? So in this way, we align ourselves with the creative flow in a larger context. So, yeah. I think that's it for what I wanted to share. If we have time for a couple of questions, maybe.
Yeah, so there are a few questions coming in there. Would anyone like to either also drop questions in here, or would you like to sort of raise your hand, as long as you've kind of clarified the question, it's within like a sentence or two, not like a 3-minute talk beforehand. So let me just find these questions. There was a little bit of a suggestion around like practicalities of some of these bits, because it's nice to see the models, but sort of get practical examples. And I guess connected to that would be Lisa asking, would like to know any suggested strategies to cultivate attunement.
Yeah. I think the first step in cultivating attunement is being aware of where your information is coming from. So just simply monitoring, your social media usage, what news sources you're reading and watching, because a lot of times we're receiving a lot of information habitually without really noticing that process. And with attunement, actually, a lot of it has to do with embodiment, because from the mind, it's very difficult to distinguish what is a signal and what is noise. So this really requires, I mean, all of the things that all the different embodiment facilitators offer in terms of, whether it's breath work or yoga or all the different kinds of things that you can do to be more connected to your body intelligence will help with attunement, because then there is a deeper knowing of what is important to pay attention to that doesn't come from the mind. It can't be filtered by the mind, basically.
Thanks, Wendy. There's also an ask of like an example of, say, dedicated space clearing, or how can people go about doing that?
Yeah. I mean, our space is on many different dimensions, right? So we have our physical space, emotional space, mental space, and energetic space. And there's, it's so personal what practices you use to clear their space. Yeah, I mean, for emotional space clearing, there's a lot of different dynamic meditations that you can do, catharsis types of processes. With the mental space, I love doing question writing, where I just write questions free-flowing for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and just empty all of my thoughts onto paper. I also personally have a really strong practice with mandala meditation, which helps me clear mental space. And yeah, with the physical space, again, all these embodiment practices, it helps with physical and energetic space clearing. So anything that you can do to shake or dance or move, all really helpful for clearing space.
You're in the perfect place for that right now, with a whole heap of embodied people on Koh Phangan in Thailand, I believe. So Kim has her hand raised. I'll try muting her, and just because we don't have much time, make sure it's kind of succinct and clear, the question.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, cool. It was to do with the Ikigai model that you were speaking about in reference to the sort of what you get paid for, and you mentioned a double positive exchange, and I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, double positive exchange, meaning that we're exchanging in multi-dimensions, right? So oftentimes we think about an exchange as you have a product or a service and somebody pays you money for that. But when we expand the dimensions of exchange to be beyond these kind of singular give and takes, there's a lot of creative potential here. So when we start to include what else would be valuable to me or to the other person who's designing this exchange besides these kind of single dimensions. So things like recognition, right? Would tagging them in a social media post or sharing something of theirs be of value to them, right? Or would offering to hold space for them to talk through an issue that they're having and giving advice, would that be of value? Would introducing them to somebody from my community who I know could support them in what they're doing, would that be of value, right? So, or would linking to them on my website so that people who are finding me are also finding them, would that be something else that could be of value, right? So it's really getting creative around the dimensions of exchange and expanding that so that there is something new created that didn't exist before. Like there's some value that's arising in the process of making the exchange. It's not finite.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Right. There's two bits I'll go for. A few people asking if you could pop that last slide up very quickly again, Wendy, just because they didn't quite get the last note or something like that.
The slides are all on my website, so you can download the infographic with all the slides if you go to regenerativepurpose.com.
Yeah, and on that, for the people, I've been posting the link there, but Wendy's also offering a her ebook on regenerative purpose for free, so you can also get that there. I'll also share at the end a few more things, but final question before that is, so is purpose a privilege, or is it only for those with privilege? What is the relationship between purpose and privilege?
This is a really good question. I actually have a whole chapter in my book about purpose and privilege. I think it's a really important thing for us to understand when we're talking about purpose work. What I would say about that is that when we decouple purpose from the form, we can see that purpose is for everyone and in everyone and moving through everyone. The reason why it might look different, I think, is because we're focused on the form, right? So if you have more privilege, this goes into the gift, right? The genius and fluid truth. You have more assets. You have more kind of raw materials to work with. You have a platform. You have a network. You have a language ability or education, or you're just part of certain social circles that others don't have access to. That privilege means that you have the possibility to potentially manifest a form of purpose that is more visible and long-lasting than someone who has less privilege. That doesn't mean that people who are less privileged don't have a purpose. It just means that we've devalued their purpose because it doesn't necessarily manifest into a lasting form. So the tricky thing about saying that purpose is a privilege is that it leads to two things which I think are not so desirable. One is that it gives us an excuse to not engage in purpose because we think, oh, it's not equal, not everybody can have a purpose, so, I don't want to be privileged, right? So I'm just, going to live a simple life and not engage in purpose, which I think is a mistake or missed opportunity, let's say. And the other thing that seeing purpose as a privilege can do that's not beneficial is that we take on a savior mentality, right? So if we think that purpose is only for people that have privilege, and we kind of take that on as a burden or a responsibility, if we see ourselves as one of the people that have privilege, that can quickly become really heavy, right? So we take on this kind of martyrdom and savior thing where I'm here to save the world, but that ultimately doesn't help us or anyone else in the end.
Thank you, Wendy, and pretty much awesomely on time with this. So Wendy's site is heywendymay.com. There's that ebook offer. I think it's timing out for the odd person, like it's working fine for me and lots of others. I think it's timing out for the odd person. Maybe it's like extra graphically, but go to the website and find your way there as well. You can also get in contact with Wendy there, I'm sure. And also, if you do want to find her on social media, like, LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or Medium, it's just at heywendymay, and you'll be able to find her on each of those. Is anything else, Wendy? I'm going to come back to you for your final top tip on purpose in a minute, but is anywhere else people can find you?
No.
I've got it all down. Okay, I got it correct this time. So just in terms of the next session, everyone, if you're someone who's too nice at times, we've got the master of working with too nice people, Erica, coming up. So she's going to be doing a session which is obviously a little bit sarcastic, how to not live your purpose. So a good girl's guide to living someone else's life. So that will be fun. So do join us there. We'll have a quick little break before that one starts in about 10 minutes. And then if you would like to sort of have all of these sessions for yourself and also go more deeply in a purpose course. So that means, I'm just going to post the link down here. So if you want to get a link and get all these recordings along with the course that you can sort of take over 3 months, join a Facebook group with it. And also today, I think the offer runs out to have free question and answer section tutorial sessions with Mark around it. So you can also go there if you'd like to get that. So at heywendymay, heywendymay.com, the links are posted there. and get the purpose course. And this summit also is kind of like a thank you to us for putting it on. All right, so Wendy, would you like to give us a final one sentence tip how to live a more purposeful life?
Yes. Thank you for preparing me for that. So I actually wrote it down. This is my one sentence takeaway, which is relax, it's happening. About purpose. Relax, it's happening anyway, but also don't fall asleep because we need your participation.
Perfect. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you for giving us your time here.